Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into something today that might seem, kind of basic at first glance,
Yeah.
English vocabulary for work. But trust me,
Right.
we're going way beyond just,
Yeah.
learn your flashcards kind of a thing. We've got a whole stack of articles and research here,
Right.
all kind of pointing to this idea that mastering the vocabulary of your specific work environment
Yeah.
can really be the key to
It's true.
unlocking all sorts of professional success.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not just about sounding smart. It's
Yeah.
about sounding like you belong.
Okay.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Every workplace has its own little dialect, right?
Yeah.
Words and phrases that get used constantly, almost like a secret code. And cracking that code can make a huge difference in how you're perceived, how effectively you communicate, and even how you kind of navigate those tricky office politics.
So we're talking about more than just,
Right.
expanding our general vocabulary.
Yeah.
It's about becoming fluent in the language of our
Absolutely.
specific industry, our company,
Your world.
even our team.
Yep.
Okay, I'm already intrigued.
Good.
But before we get into how to do all of this,
Sure.
let's back up for a second.
Okay.
Convince me.
All right.
Why is this so important? I mean, I can get my point across in emails and meetings,
You can.
even if I'm not using the fanciest words, right?
Sure. You can get by.
Okay.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
Your vocabulary is a tool.
Okay.
And the more precise and powerful your tools are, the better you can build something amazing, right?
Okay.
So think about giving a presentation.
Right.
You could just lay out the facts,
Uh-huh.
or you could weave in vivid language,
Yeah.
compelling metaphors,
Yeah.
industry-specific terms that show you really know your stuff. Which presentation do you think is going to resonate more with the audience?
The one that's crafted with those powerful words, for
Yeah.
sure.
Absolutely.
Like the difference between,
Right.
Using a rusty screwdriver
Yeah.
and a high-quality drill.
Exactly. And it's not just about presentations.
Right.
It's about
Yeah.
writing emails that get noticed,
Uh-huh.
leading meetings that are engaging and productive,
Right.
even just having those casual conversations with colleagues
Yeah.
where you can effortlessly slip in the right jargon,
Yeah.
show you're in the know.
So it impacts how seriously I'm taken, how well I can explain my ideas,
Absolutely.
maybe even my chances of getting that promotion.
Could be.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here.
Good.
But
Yeah.
workplace vocabulary feels like a huge umbrella.
It is a big topic.
Where do we even begin to break that down?
Well, the first thing to remember
Hmm.
is it's not one giant word list.
Okay.
It's more like a series of interconnected vocabularies,
Yeah.
each tailored to a specific situation. Think about it.
All right.
The words you use in a team brainstorm are going to be different from the language you need
Right.
for a client presentation or a formal report.
So we're talking about different categories of workplace vocabulary.
Exactly. Let's start with the one everyone loves to complain about,
Right.
business jargon.
Oh, yeah.
Every industry has its own set of buzzwords and acronyms.
Okay.
You've got your synergies and paradigm shifts,
Of course.
your deep dives.
We're guilty of that one ourselves.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
And an ever-popular moving the needle.
Oh, don't forget disrupt and innovate.
Oh, of course, yes.
It seems like every company wants to be a disruptor these days.
And that's actually a great example of how the meaning of jargon can shift depending on the context.
Okay.
So disrupt might sound impressive
Uh-huh.
in a tech startup pitch,
Right.
but in a more traditional industry,
Yeah.
it might come across as jarring or even disrespectful.
So understanding the nuances of business jargon is key. It really is.
You don't want to sound like you're just throwing around buzzwords without really understanding what they mean.
Exactly.
What about other categories?
Yeah.
What else should we be thinking about?
Well, meetings and presentations are a big one.
Okay.
You've got your agendas and action items, your
Right.
feedback loops and deliverables.
Yeah.
Knowing this vocabulary not only helps you follow along,
Okay.
but allows you to actively participate, contribute ideas,
Yeah.
and even take charge of the conversation.
Right, because fumbling over basic terms like minutes or consensus can make you seem unprepared, even if you have brilliant ideas to share.
Absolutely.
It's like showing up to a construction site with a plastic spoon instead of a shovel.
Exactly. And then you've got emails and other written communication.
Yeah.
It's a whole different ballgame.
Okay.
Think about the tone you want to convey. Professional, friendly, assertive, The words and phrases you choose
Right.
can make a huge difference
Yeah.
in how your message is received.
So please find attached the report might get the job done,
It might.
but something like,
Yeah.
I'd love to get your feedback on this report when you have a moment,
Right.
sounds much more
Much better.
engaging and collaborative.
Exactly. And those small tweaks to your language
Right.
can have a big impact on how you're perceived
Okay.
by colleagues, clients, even your boss.
All right, I'm sold.
Good.
This vocabulary thing is clearly more important than I realized.
I think so.
But now I'm thinking,
Yeah.
okay, how do I actually do this?
Right.
How do I become fluent in all these different workplace vocabularies without spending every waking moment studying a dictionary?
That's where we get to the really interesting part.
Okay.
The strategies, the tips,
Yeah.
the actionable steps you can take to supercharge your vocabulary.
Okay.
And luckily for you,
Yeah. We've got a whole stack of research and expert insights
Right.
just waiting to be unpacked.
well, let's unpack them. I'm ready to learn some serious vocabulary hacks.
Great. Let's dive in and start exploring those strategies.
Okay.
But first, a quick word from our sponsors.
Of course. Welcome back, everyone. Before the break, we were
Right.
getting pretty pumped about this idea of mastering different types of workplace vocabulary.
Just exciting stuff.
And I'm excited to dig into some
Yeah.
specific strategies for making that happen.
And the good news is,
Okay.
this isn't about rote memorization or cramming flashcards. It's about approaching vocabulary in a way that's engaging,
Okay.
even enjoyable.
Okay. I'm all for making this enjoyable.
Good. Where do we start?
Let's tackle that beast we all love to hate,
All right.
business jargon.
Yeah.
Remember, every industry has its own set of buzzwords.
Right.
And the key is to decode the language of your specific field. So more than just understanding the definitions,
Yeah.
it's about understanding how those words are actually used in my day-to-day work.
Exactly.
Okay.
And one of the best ways to do this
Yeah.
is to become a bit of a word detective.
Okay.
Pay close attention to how those buzzwords are used.
Great.
In meetings, in emails, in industry publications, even in casual conversations with colleagues.
Okay.
Notice the context, the tone, the subtle ways those words can convey meaning
Right.
beyond their dictionary definitions.
So, like, if my boss keeps talking about low-hanging fruit,
Yeah.
I shouldn't just assume it's a weird snack preference.
Right, exactly.
I need to figure out what it means in our company culture.
Exactly. It might mean easy wins, quick projects to boost morale,
Okay.
or even something completely different.
Right.
It's all about observation and inference.
Okay.
And don't be afraid to ask questions. If you hear a term you don't understand,
Yeah.
don't just nod along.
Well, pretending you know what it means.
Mm-hmm.
Ask a colleague for clarification.
Mm-hmm.
Look it up online.
Okay.
Or even jot it down
Yeah.
in a little vocabulary notebook
right.
for later investigation.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's like learning a new language by immersion.
I like that.
But instead of traveling to a foreign country,
Right.
I'm just paying closer attention to the language happening all around me at work.
I like that analogy.
Okay.
Now, let's shift gears
All right.
and talk about meetings and presentations.
Okay.
These are high-stakes situations where vocabulary can really make or break your impact.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
I've definitely been in meetings where I felt lost
I hear you.
because I didn't understand half the terms being thrown around.
Right?
It's like everyone else is speaking a language I only partially understand.
And it's not just about understanding the terms.
Yeah.
It's about being able to use them
Yeah.
confidently and correctly.
Okay.
So let's get specific. All right.
Yeah.
Let's say you're in a meeting
Mm-hmm.
and your boss asks for your takeaways
Okay.
from a presentation.
Okay, so takeaways.
Yeah.
That's one of those business jargon terms that feels a bit vague.
You can do.
Does it just mean what I learned?
It can.
Okay.
But in a business context,
Yeah.
it often means more than that.
Okay.
Your boss is likely looking for
Yeah.
the key insights,
Mm-hmm.
the actionable points,
Mm-hmm.
the things you're going to do differently
Okay.
based on what you've just heard.
Right.
So instead of saying,
Yeah.
oh, that was interesting,
Right. Right.
you might say,
Yeah.
my main takeaway is that we need to prioritize X
Uh-huh.
and start implementing Y immediately.
So it's about taking those insights
Yeah.
and turning them into
Exactly.
concrete actions or recommendations.
Exactly. And using those specific terms
Oh,
like
yeah.
takeaway
Right.
and actionable
Yeah.
shows that you're thinking strategically.
And engaging with the material on a deeper level.
I'm starting to see how mastering this vocabulary
Yeah,
can really shift the way I participate in meetings.
it can.
Instead of just being a passive listener,
Right?
I can actively contribute
Absolutely.
and even steer the conversation
Yeah,
in a more productive direction.
exactly. And that confidence and clarity
Yeah.
can really make you stand out in a
Yeah.
positive way.
Now, let's talk about another crucial skill,
Sure.
giving and receiving feedback.
Ooh, feedback.
That's a loaded word.
It can be.
It can be so tricky to navigate,
Mm-hmm.
both giving it and receiving it.
It can be.
Yeah.
But having the right vocabulary
Hmm.
can make the whole process a lot smoother
Okay.
and more productive.
Right.
So let's say you need to give feedback to a colleague
Huh.
on a report they've written.
Okay.
Instead of just saying, it's good, but it could be better.
Right, which is what I usually say.
Right.
Yeah.
You could use more specific language.
Yes.
For example, you could say,
Yeah.
I really appreciate the thoroughness of your research.
Uh-huh.
I wonder if we could make the executive summary more concise
Okay.
and focus on the key takeaways
Right.
for our stakeholders.
That sounds so much more constructive and helpful
It is.
than just vague praise or criticism.
Yes.
It's like I'm giving them a roadmap for improvement,
Exactly.
not just a pat on the back or a
Right.
slap on the wrist.
Exactly. And the same goes for receiving feedback.
Okay.
If someone says your presentation lacked engagement,
Yeah.
don't just get defensive.
Right.
Ask them to elaborate.
Okay.
What specifically did they find disengaging?
Mm-hmm.
Were the visuals lacking?
Okay.
Was the pace too slow?
Right.
The more specific you can get,
Yeah.
the more valuable the feedback becomes.
This is making me realize how much vocabulary is about clarity,
It is.
about getting everyone on the same page
Mm-hmm.
and avoiding those misunderstandings.
Yeah.
That can derail a project or even damage relationships.
It's true. And that clarity is essential, not
Yeah.
just in meetings and presentations,
Right.
but in all forms of workplace communication, including those dreaded emails.
Oh, emails.
No.
I can spend hours agonizing over the wording of an email,
That's tough.
trying to strike the right tone and convey my message clearly
Yeah.
without sounding too stiff or too casual.
I feel you.
The delicate balance.
It is a delicate balance. But here's a tip.
Okay.
Pay attention to the language used in emails you receive from
Right.
colleagues and superiors.
Okay.
How do they start and end their messages?
Right.
What kind of phrases do they use to make requests,
Mhm.
express appreciation, or offer feedback?
Okay.
It's a great way to learn by example
Right.
and absorb the vocabulary that's considered appropriate and effective in your workplace culture.
So it's like a subtle form of vocabulary espionage.
I like it.
I'm taking notes on how the pros do it
Yeah.
and adapting their strategies
Right.
to my own communication style.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And remember,
Yeah.
it's not about copying someone else's style verbatim.
Right.
It's about observing the nuances,
Ah.
understanding the unwritten rules,
Like-
and then developing your own voice
Right.
that feels authentic and professional.
This is all making so much sense.
Good.
But before we get too carried away with email etiquette,
Sure.
I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier.
Okay.
The importance of understanding the emotional impact of words.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The words we choose can have a profound impact
Mm-hmm.
on how others feel,
Right.
how they perceive us,
Uh-huh.
and how effectively we can build relationships
Yeah.
and influence outcomes.
So it's not just about using big words or sounding smart.
Right.
It's about choosing words
Yeah.
that resonate with our audience
Exactly.
and create the desired emotional response.
Okay. Let's say you're leading a team
Mm-hmm.
through a challenging project.
All right.
You could say,
Yeah.
we have a lot of work to do,
Uh-huh.
which might sound a bit flat and uninspiring.
Right.
Or you could say,
Uh-huh.
we're facing some tough obstacles,
Mm-hmm.
but I know we have the talent and the tenacity
Yeah.
to overcome them.
Right.
That second phrase conveys a sense of optimism,
Uh-huh.
confidence, and shared purpose
Yeah.
that can really motivate your team.
I love that example.
Yeah.
It's like you're not just stating a fact,
Right.
you're painting a picture with words
Mm-hmm.
and inviting your team to be part of that picture.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that ability to evoke emotions
Yeah.
and inspire action
Mm-hmm.
is a powerful skill, both in leadership
Mm.
and in everyday communication.
This is making me think about all the times
Yeah.
I've used the wrong words,
It happens.
or at least not the most effective words,
Sure.
and probably missed opportunities to connect with people
Yeah.
or get my point across more persuasively.
We've all been there.
Right.
But the good news is,
Yes.
the more we pay attention to the language we use
Right.
and the impact it has,
Right.
the better we become at choosing words that resonate
Okay.
and achieve our desired outcomes.
All right. I'm feeling inspired to level up my vocabulary game.
Good.
But before we move on to
Yeah.
specific tips and techniques,
Sure.
let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsors.
Okay.
We'll be back in a flash with more vocabulary insights.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been unpacking all this stuff about workplace vocabulary,
Yeah.
how it can impact, your communication,
Right.
your relationships, even your career.
Big stuff.
Yeah, it's one thing to understand the why,
Hmm.
but it's another to actually put it into practice.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So let's shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
Talk about how to actually build this powerful vocabulary we've been talking about. I'm all ears. Give me those actionable tips,
Okay.
secret strategies.
All right, here's the first one.
Yeah.
And this might sound a little counterintuitive.
Okay.
But embrace the idea of being a beginner.
Okay.
It's okay to not know all the words.
Right.
In fact, acknowledging that is the first step to growth.
So ditch the ego.
Yeah.
Admit I don't have all the answers. Be open to learning. Okay, I can do that.
Exactly. And once you've kind of embraced that beginner's mindset, the next step is to cultivate curiosity.
Okay.
Start paying attention to the words you encounter in your work environment.
All right. So I'm actively listening,
Yeah.
noticing those words that seem important or confusing.
Yeah.
What do I do with them?
This is where that little vocabulary notebook we talked about earlier comes in handy.
Okay.
Jot down those words along with the context in which you encountered them.
Right.
And this doesn't have to be a formal definition or anything.
Okay.
Just a quick note to jog your memory later.
So like if my boss says we need to drill down into the data on this project,
Yeah.
I might write down
Yeah.
drill down deeper analysis.
Perfect. That's enough to remind you to look it up later.
Okay.
And that's the next step.
Right.
Actively seek out the meaning and usage of those words.
Oh, shit.
You got your dictionaries, online resources,
Good.
even colleagues who might be walking thesauruses.
Right.
Don't be afraid to ask.
Don't be afraid to ask, okay?
But it's not just about understanding definitions.
Right. It's about...
It's about incorporating those words into your own communication.
Exactly. And
here's a key strategy.
Doug.
Don't just memorize definitions. Try to create vivid mental images.
Okay.
Or even tell yourself little stories
Right.
that connect the word to its meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Our brains are wired for storytelling.
Yeah.
It helps us remember things better.
So for drill down, I might picture myself as like
Yeah.
a data miner using a giant drill to dig deeper into the layers of information. A bit cheesy, maybe, but
It works.
I think I'd remember it.
Exactly. The more senses you can involve in the learning process, the better.
Okay.
Now,
Yeah.
once you've got a few new words under your belt, don't let them just sit there gathering dust.
So no hoarding vocabulary like a language dragon.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
It's time to put those words into action.
Okay.
Look for opportunities to use them in your everyday communication.
Right.
Start small.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe sprinkle a new word or two into your next email.
Okay.
Or try using a more sophisticated phrase in your next meeting.
But what if I use it wrong?
That's okay.
I don't want to sound like, I'm trying too hard
Yeah.
or using words I don't fully understand.
Here's the thing.
Okay.
Mistakes are part of the learning process.
Right.
Don't be afraid to experiment.
Yeah.
Stretch your vocabulary muscles a bit.
Okay.
The more you use those words, the more comfortable and natural they'll become.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do happen to slip up, just laugh it off and keep going.
So embrace those awkward moments as learning opportunities. Got it.
Exactly.
Okay. Any other strategies
Sure.
for making this process a bit easier, a bit less daunting?
One thing that can be really helpful
Yeah.
is to find a vocabulary buddy.
Okay.
Someone you can practice with, share new words with,
Mm,
maybe even challenge each other with little vocabulary quizzes.
like a workout buddy, but for my brain.
Exactly. Learning together can make the process more fun,
Right.
keep you both accountable.
And speaking of fun, don't underestimate the power of games and puzzles.
Oh, absolutely.
Crossword, Scrabble, even those,
Yeah.
silly word games on your phone.
It all helps.
They can all help expand your vocabulary
Yeah,
in a way that feels less like work and more like play.
exactly.
So I can tell my boss I'm doing professional development while I'm crushing it at Words with Friends. I love it.
Exactly. And finally,
Yeah.
remember that building vocabulary is a journey, not a destination.
Okay.
There's always more to learn, more nuances to discover. So be patient with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Enjoy the process
I am
and celebrate those small wins along the way.
This has been such an insightful deep dive. I'm feeling inspired and energized to take my vocabulary to the next level.
Me too. And remember,
Yeah.
the words we use have the power to inform, to inspire, to connect,
Mm.
and to create real change in the world.
Powerful stuff.
So keep learning, keep exploring,
Okay.
and never underestimate the power of language.
That's a perfect note to end on.
I think so.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into workplace vocabulary.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you've learned some valuable tips and strategies
I hope so.
for expanding your own vocabulary and unlocking your full communication potential.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep those dictionaries handy
Yes.
and those ears open for new words.
All right, so are you ready to unlock some serious word power?
Ooh.
You gave us
So?
this stack of material on building a better vocabulary for work, and I have to say, I'm already intrigued.
Yeah.
It's like we're about to decode the secret language of professional success.
Ah.
We've got excerpts from a really insightful podcast episode, and let me tell you, this isn't just about sounding smart.
No, not at all. You hit the nail on the head. It's about wielding language as a tool.
Right.
Think of it as upgrading your professional toolbox.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
So why does this even matter? I mean, we all know words are important, but is a fancy vocabulary really going to make or break my career?
You know, it's not about being fancy. It's about being effective in the workplace. The words you choose can impact how others perceive your competence, your credibility, even your leadership potential. Let's say you're in a meeting and you can articulate your ideas clearly and persuasively.
Right.
That can make a huge difference in getting your ideas heard and implemented.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here. It's not just about impressing people with big words. It's about having the right words at your fingertips to navigate those crucial moments.
Absolutely.
But let's be real, the workplace isn't just one big vocabulary test. The podcast episode we're diving into actually breaks down vocabulary into different categories, right?
Absolutely. There's business jargon. Of course, we've all heard those buzzwords that make you want to roll your eyes. Synergy, paradigm shift, disruptive innovation. But understanding this jargon, knowing when to use it and when to avoid it, is key to fitting in and being taken seriously.
You know, I actually had a really embarrassing moment with jargon once.
Uh-oh.
I tried to use the word synergy in a presentation, and it totally backfired.
Oh, no.
My boss just gave me this blank stare, and I could tell I had completely missed the mark. It was not my most synergistic moment.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
But that's why it's so important to go beyond just memorizing definitions.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the nuances of how words are used in different contexts. The same word can have very different meanings depending on the situation, the industry, even the company culture.
So it's like learning a new language almost.
Is
You
it?
have to immerse yourself in the culture to really get it.
Exactly. And the podcast gives some great tips on how to do they talk about reading industry publications, listening to podcasts and webinars. It's like absorbing the language of your field through osmosis.
Okay, those are all great passive learning strategies, but what about actually expanding my active vocabulary? You know, the words I can use in meetings and emails and presentations.
That's where the vocabulary journal technique comes in. And it's not about just writing down definitions.
Right.
Imagine capturing not just the definition, but a vivid memory, a personal anecdote, or even a funny image associated with each word that makes it stick.
So instead of just writing down synergy, the interaction or cooperation of two or more organizations to produce a combined effect greater than the sum of their separate effects.
You could jot down synergy. Remember that time I tried to sound smart in a meeting and used it completely wrong, never again?
Okay, that's actually brilliant. I'm a visual learner, so having those kinds of mental images will definitely help me remember. But what about actually using these new words? I know I tend to fall back on my old vocabulary because it feels safe and familiar.
Think of it like learning a new dance move. It feels awkward at first, but the more you practice, the more natural it becomes. It's the same with vocabulary. Start by incorporating new words into your writing.
Okay.
Emails are a great place to experiment because you have a little more time to think things through.
So instead of saying we need to increase sales, I could try something like,
We need to aggressively penetrate the market.
whoa, that definitely sounds more strategic and impactful. But wouldn't that sound a bit pretentious in an email to my team?
That's a great question,
Oh,
and
go.
it brings us to another key point. Audience awareness. You wouldn't use the same vocabulary with your colleagues as you would with a client or a senior executive.
You're right. I've definitely been in meetings where someone used a bunch of jargon and I had no idea what they were talking about. It felt more like they were trying to show off than actually communicate.
Mastering vocabulary is not just about sounding impressive. It's about decoding the subtle language of power dynamics
Yeah.
and recognizing when someone's using jargon to obfuscate rather than clarify.
Okay, this is getting really interesting. So we've got the why, we've got the different categories of workplace vocabulary, and we've even got some strategies for expanding our active vocabulary. Having all these great strategies is exciting, but it can also feel overwhelming. Let's talk about the tools.
The podcast episode we're deep diving into actually gives us like a whole arsenal of tools and resources.
Yeah.
It's like they've equipped us for a vocabulary expedition.
All right, let's gear up. What do they recommend?
Well, there's the classic thesaurus, of course.
Right.
But it's not just about finding synonyms.
Right.
It's about understanding the subtle shades of meaning between words.
Uh-huh.
For example, instead of saying happy me, you could use elated, joyful, jubilant, each conveying a slightly different intensity of emotion.
So it's about adding more colors to your language palette.
Precisely. And then there are vocabulary building apps.
Oh, yeah.
They mention one called Word Vocabulary. It's catchy, right? These apps can be great for learning new words on the go.
Yeah, they can, but you mentioned intentional use of tools.
Yes.
But honestly, I'll download apps and forget about them.
Oh, yeah. We've all been there.
So how do you really stay consistent?
What works for me is setting a small, achievable goal.
Okay.
Maybe it's learning 3 new words a week or using the thesaurus once a day. The key is to make it a habit, not a chore.
Right. That makes sense. It's like anything else. Consistency is key.
Yeah.
The podcast also mentioned online courses. Are those worth the investment?
They can be, especially if you're looking for a more structured approach or want to focus on a specific area like business writing or public speaking. But remember, even the best course won't do the work for you. You have to be actively engaged and put in the effort.
Okay, so we've got the tools, we've got the strategies, but I think it's important to acknowledge that this whole process can feel a bit intimidating. I mean, what if I use a word incorrectly and sound pretentious? Or worse, what if I completely blank in the middle of a presentation?
You've just hit upon one of the biggest challenges people face when trying to expand their vocabulary. Fear.
Oh, yeah.
Fear of sounding silly, fear of making mistakes, fear of being judged. But remember, everyone starts somewhere. Even the most eloquent speakers were once fumbling for the right words.
That's reassuring, but isn't there a risk of sounding pretentious if you overuse big words? How do you find that balance?
The key is to use vocabulary that is appropriate for the context, and your audience don't try to shoehorn in fancy words just to impress people. It's more important to be clear, concise, and authentic. Think of it this way. You're not trying to sound like a walking dictionary. You're trying to use language to connect with people and make your ideas come alive.
That's a great point. It's about using the right tool for the job, not just using the shiniest tool you have. But what about those moments when you just completely blank on a word? It's like your brain decides to take a vacation at the worst possible time.
We've all been there, and it can be incredibly frustrating. But instead of getting flustered, try to rephrase your thought using different words, or if you can just laugh it off and say, oh, the word I'm looking for is escaping me right now. But you know what I mean? Most people are understanding and will be happy to help you out.
I love that approach. It takes the pressure off and shows that you're human. It's a good reminder that we're all learning and growing, and it's okay to make mistakes along the way. But what about those of us who just aren't naturally good with words? Are we doomed to a life of linguistic mediocrity?
Not at all. Remember, vocabulary is a skill, and like any skill that can be developed with practice. Think about learning to play a musical instrument or mastering a new sport. It takes time, effort, and dedication.
Yeah.
The same is true for vocabulary. The more you invest in it, the more fluent you'll become.
You're making me feel a lot more optimistic about all of this, but let's get practical. What's one concrete step our listener can take today to start building their vocabulary?
Here's a challenge.
Yep.
Pick one new word today and use it in a conversation, an email, or even a social media post. Just make sure you understand its meaning and use it correctly.
Okay.
That's one small step towards becoming a more powerful communicator.
I love that it's a small action with potentially big rewards, but expanding our vocabulary isn't just about individual words, right? It's about understanding how words work together to create meaning. The podcast episode mentioned something called contextual learning. What exactly does that mean?
Contextual learning is about paying attention to how words are used in real-life situations. Instead of just memorizing definitions, you're observing how words interact, how they create tone and style, how they convey different levels of formality.
Okay.
For example, you wouldn't use the same language in a casual conversation with a coworker as you would in a formal presentation to your CEO.
So it's like becoming a language detective. You're observing, analyzing, and figuring out the rules of the game.
Exactly. And the more you practice, the better you'll become at decoding and using language effectively in different contexts.
This has been an incredible deep dive into the world of vocabulary. We've gone beyond just memorizing words and explored the deeper nuances of how language works.
And remember, this is a journey, not a destination. There's always more to learn more, to explore more ways to refine your communication skills.
Speaking of refining our skills, the podcast episode we've been dissecting also touches on the importance of practice. It's not enough to just learn new words. We have to actually use them right. It's like learning a new instrument. You can't just read about it. You have to actually play it to get better.
Exactly. The podcast suggests using new words in conversations, work training, even teaching others. Imagine explaining cross-functional teams to a new colleague.
Wait, hold on. For someone who maybe hasn't encountered that term before, what does cross-functional actually mean?
Great point. It means teams made up of people from different departments, like marketing, sales, and engineering, working together. So by explaining that to someone, you're not just using the term, you're cementing your understanding of it.
So I'm teaching and reinforcing my own learning, Sneaky. The podcast also mentions the idea of becoming comfortable with discomfort. What do they mean by that?
It's about pushing yourself outside your comfort zone. It can feel intimidating to use new words, especially in front of senior colleagues. But remember, everyone feels that way at first. The more you practice, the less self-conscious you'll become.
That's so true. I used to be terrified of public speaking, but the more I did it, the easier it became. It's like anything else, practice makes progress.
And here's the thing, mastering vocabulary isn't just about sounding smart or getting a promotion. It's about unlocking your full potential. When you have the words to articulate your thoughts and feelings, you can connect with others on a deeper level, advocate for yourself more effectively, and even challenge the status quo.
I've never thought about it that way before. It's not just about climbing the corporate ladder. It's about having a voice and using it.
Exactly. It's about empowerment, both personally and professionally. And that's what I find so inspiring about this whole journey of vocabulary expansion. It's not just about learning words. It's about unlocking new ways of thinking and understanding the world around you.
This deep dive has been truly eye-opening. We've gone beyond the surface level of simply learning new words and explored the deeper impact that vocabulary can have on our lives. It's been a journey of discovery, and I feel inspired to keep expanding my own vocabulary toolbox. But before we wrap up, I want to leave our listener with one final thought-provoking question.
Now that you've got all these strategies and insights, what's one small change you can make this week to start leveling up your professional vocabulary? Maybe it's committing to learning one new word a day or trying to use a thesaurus in your next email. Whatever it is, take that first step and watch your communication skills soar.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the power of vocabulary. Remember, language is a tool, and like any tool, the more skilled you become at using it, the more you can accomplish. Keep those dictionaries handy, embrace those vocabulary apps, and never stop exploring the fascinating world of words.